We've got, back here in London, we've managed to put together the computer-generated data from the latest information before the loss of signal on the DID, that's the dust impact experiment. And it does seem that there was a fair pile of it in those few minutes back, 10 minutes ago, when they were talking about having had a surge, which might well be the reason why the spacecraft was knocked off course and we lost the signal. I was talking while Patrick was having a discussion there on the air with one of our guests here, who of course made the rather important point that whether the spacecraft signals were cut off suddenly or not, or faded in any measurable way, but of course it was Colin Ronan. Let me ask you to explain what you meant by that, Colin.
Well, it was just that if it's knocked off course, and not destroyed, if the antenna moved away from off a degree, then the signal should fade away. Whereas if the whole device was smashed into by a large particle, then you'd get a sudden cessation of all signals.
Well, either way, ladies and gentlemen, whatever reason we're no longer getting signals, obviously some magnificent data has been collected, and there's a man with Patrick now who no doubt everybody is waiting to hear from, Fred Whipple, the father of cometry himself.
And after all, who better to join us at this critical juncture than Fred Whipple, the man who worked out the dirty snowball theory of the comet. Well, Fred, you said earlier on that we were going to see the nucleus tonight. Did we?
We did. I'm quite sure we did, yes.
It was, in fact, that red mass that we saw on the screen.
Well, it will have to be analyzed in more detail without all of those pretty colors, which may mislead the public as to the nature of a comet nucleus, because it's really a very black, gray, like perhaps black velvet or charcoal.
Well, we have emphasized all the way through this program that these colors are not genuine. You don't really see a comet like that. But from those pictures, what can you tell about the composition of the nucleus? Can you think you can definitely confirm finally your dirty snowball theory?
Well, I think that we have enough evidence that will come out of the spectroscopic evidence, the nature of the gases, and the analysis of the dust to show it conclusively. Yes.
Of course, it's not only the camera, as we know. I mean, the camera did magnificently right up to the time of closest encounter.
Yes.
Now, I mean, imagine those last pictures that actually came back from Giotto were taken just about the time, and it was only something like 540 kilometers away from the nucleus itself.
Or perhaps a little farther than that, but perhaps 1,000 kilometers, but something of that order.
But of course, it's not only those pictures that will help to confirm your theories, all the other experiments as well. Which do you think are the most important of those from your point of view?
Well, I don't know. There's several of them, of course, but I think the one that tells the composition of the gas will be in the final, when the final story is told, will be the most important.
Well, now come back to the matter of the moment. We have lost all trace of Giotto. What do you think has happened? Has the spacecraft been destroyed? Is it the cameras been put out of action? Or has the antenna been jolted so that at the present moment we are not receiving the signal?
Well, I don't think at this point I can answer that question. I think that will be a technical question. But I'm sure that the dust in the neighborhood of the nucleus did it, and shows that comets are very dangerous when you go through them at 70 kilometers per second.
That's very right. But at least it's proved what you wanted. Fred Whipple, thank you very much. James.
Well, back here we've got somebody on the telephone in the United States who might have a few interesting remarks to make, given the fact that he's the only man to have, as it were, taken a spacecraft through similar circumstances, though not quite in the same way and not as close. Bob Farquhar, who's in the United States on the phone at the moment, was in charge of being able to put that spacecraft I mentioned to you before, Icy it was called, through the tail of a comet called Giacobini-Zinner some time back. Bob, how are you reacting to what's been happening tonight, particularly in terms of the experience with the dust?
Well, actually, I was very thrilled to watch the encounter. I only wish that we could have played a more important role.
We're getting Bob too well there.
Halley's comet.
We can get stuff from Giotto healthily enough. But no.
I think that the Giotto flyby is going to be one of the great successes of all time as far as spaceflight is concerned.
You said when Icy came through the tail, maybe comets don't have too much dust around them anyway. How do you feel about that in the light of what's happened tonight?
Well, obviously, different comets have different amounts of dust. I think one of the things that we're going to try to do in the future is to collect some of this dust, but we're going to have to go a heck of a lot slower than Giotto did. and we also can't get too close to large comets like Halley. I think one of the interesting things that I heard was that the bow shock time of detection wasn't that far different from what we found at Giacobini's Inner. I thought that was kind of odd because I think that the activity of the two comets are quite different.
Yeah, what would it indicate to you, the fact that we lost telemetry? Do you think it's possible that perhaps after if Giotto has survived, if it comes out of the dust cloud, it could go back perhaps onto the automatic reacquisition of proper attitude and get back into control, into contact with us? Is such a thing possible?
Yes, I think that there is some hope that the spacecraft has survived the encounter, and that maybe we just lost lock with the antenna as some dust particles hit it and knocked it off of the pointing towards the Earth. I'm very hopeful of that because I've been working with Rudiger Reinhardt to look for ways to target Giotto back to the Earth so we can do a swing by of the Earth and then onto another comet.
Yeah, there were always plans that, if Giotto survived, that it would do the same thing, that it would move off elsewhere, and we'll wish it luck, and we'll obviously not know until sometime in the middle of the night whether or not they've managed to reacquire the signal. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us, Bob. We've got now the first real enhanced picture available from the spacecraft. There you can see it. And would you care to comment on that, Alec?
Yes, I think it's a remarkable picture. There's clearly a lot of irregularity in the nuclear region there, and also a lot of surface structure that we saw before. It's much easier to see it in this picture that we're seeing now. But of course, we still have to, as has been said by many others, massage it further, and of course we can't really make out exactly where we are in the nucleus because the colour boundaries are a little bit confusing.
But sorry, you're saying where we are in the nucleus. You mean a large part of this picture could represent the nucleus itself?
Yes, most definitely.
In other words, we are looking at a partial view of the entire nucleus, you think?
No, I think we're seeing the nucleus within that picture, and it's probably in the area of the green part of the frame that you're seeing. But just where it comes in depends very much on where the colour boundaries are placed, and that is a matter of massaging. We'd see it more easily if it were black and white, but then we wouldn't see the whole depth of the image, and that's why we're seeing it in this false colour now.
Let me go back to Jack Meadows. One of the things that they said before they went was that if they got close enough, the camera worked, they would be able to see features on the surface of the nucleus, presumably after massaging the pictures, down to as small as, 150 feet across?
Yes,
Now,
well, I think
what would
it
you
was
have seen
150 metres, but perhaps 150 feet, never mind. Yes, sorry.
Oh, I've just heard we've got some new information from Patrick. Excuse me, let me go back to Darmstadt.
Yes, it is indeed. It's rather encouraging news, and this comes from Parkes in Australia, the main receiving station. Apparently, there are being signals received now from Giotto. They're very weak and they're fluctuating, and they can't at the present moment give a picture. But the fact that they are being received at all indicates that probably the spacecraft has not been destroyed, and that our conjecture earlier on that it was in fact an impact which thrust the antenna to one side and made the signal miss the Earth is probably the right one. And if that is so, all the indications are that we may reacquire Giotto again in something like 15 to 20 minutes. Well, of course, then it's going to be well away from closest approach, but it still should be enough to send back some data on the outward journey, if that is true. We can't be absolutely certain yet, but I'm glad to say that it is starting to look as if, after all, Giotto has not been destroyed. It has indeed survived. And so, even if Giotto hasn't survived, and I think it has, in fact, we've learnt a great deal. It has been a remarkably successful, very successful mission in all respects. It was the first attempt to probe the nucleus of a comet, and it has done so. We think we've actually seen the nucleus. It's paved the way for future probes. But don't forget also that even though encounter is now past, and whether Giotto has survived or not, there's still a great deal of work to be done. We've had the raw data. They've now got to be processed, analysed, and worked over. And I estimate this is going to take a whole team of scientists, many months, probably a couple of years, and it may be at least 2 years before we get the final results of Giotto. But whether or not we're going to get any more detail, there's no doubt whatsoever that Giotto has been an outstanding success. And I think it's going to be remembered as long as space history lasts. And so, for the moment, from Darmstadt, good night.
And here in London, as Francis and his guests have watched through this evening, I think we've all been aware that it was quite an extraordinary event. As Jack Meadows said earlier on, The important thing was that nothing happened for a long time, and then everything happened. And as you saw, everything happened, and possibly for a certain amount of time, even the destruction of the spacecraft. That now looks as if it may survive, may come out the other side of the coma, and survive to visit another comet, because I understand that it still has plenty of fuel on board. So that brings us to the end of our program. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. I hope you enjoyed going through the same process that the scientists went through, the long build-up to the short but highly intense results. And over in Darmstadt, you can see that the scientists are feeling pretty much the same way, as everybody who's been involved in this mission from the beginning, because, after all, literally speaking, the encounter with Halley has been, for everyone concerned, well, almost everyone concerned, except perhaps the youngest people watching, and indeed one of our guests here tonight, it has been, for everybody concerned, literally a once-in-a-lifetime experience. There will not be another encounter with Halley program for another 76 years. So, on that note, good night.